Now, before we start writing our first program, I want to spend a minute or two talking to you about Python 2 and Python 3. Now, these are the two main versions of Python, and obviously Python 3 is the latest version. So you might be thinking, which version are we going to be using throughout the course? Well, the quick answer to that is both, and by the end of the course, you're going to be able to write programs in both Python 2 and Python 3. The reason for this is, and you probably hear this from a lot of programmers, is if you learn programming properly, then you're going to be able to write programs in any programming language. All you have to do is spend some time reading the syntax and getting familiar with the way that you write code for this language. But you're going to already know the concepts and the way of how to think of a problem, how to model it and solve it. So writing in a different language is not going to be a problem. Therefore, if you learn programming in Python 2 or in Python 3, then the version number is not going to make a big difference to you because you're still using the same language. You're either using a slightly newer or a slightly older version. Now, you might be thinking, why are we even talking about Python 2 if 3 is the latest version? Well, the answer is simple. There is a huge number of programs that's already been written in Python 2. So if you ever wanted to use one of these programs in your program, or if you ever wanted to read them and modify them, you're going to have to understand how Python 2 works. Also, there is still a lot of libraries that only work on Python 2, and some of them have a Python 3 version, but the Python 3 is more buggy than Python 2, so you might end up using Python 2. Another reason is a lot of Linux and Unix systems still come with Python 2 as the default Python interpreter. So if you ever wanted to exploit these systems, you're going to have to write programs in Python 2. Now, don't get confused and don't worry about the two versions. Like I said, at the end of the day, you're writing programs in the same programming language. And the differences are actually very small, especially when it comes to the things that we're going to be doing in this course. So they might be slight changes in the names of the libraries and the library calls, or slight changes in some of the statements. So I'm actually going to be covering these changes as we go throughout the course. And therefore, by the end of the course, you're going to be able to write programs and understand programs written in both Python 2 and Python 3. Now let's go ahead and start writing our first program. Now, in most cases, all you need is a text editor in order to write a program. So now I'm in Kali Linux, and I'm going to go to Leafpad, which is a text editor that comes pre-installed with Kali Linux. And we can start writing our Python program straight away in here. Now, there are text editors or IDEs that's designed for programming, and we'll get into that in the next lecture. But for now, I'm keeping everything as simple as possible, and I'm actually going to write a very, very simple program that will only display a message on screen. Now, in the future, we will not be writing useless programs like this one, but this is just an introduction, so I just want you to get an idea of what a program is and how to run it. So, in order to print something on screen in Python, we can use the print function. So I can just do print, that's the name of the function, and then we can use two brackets and give it the message that we want to print between these two brackets. Now, since the message is going to be text, we have to enclose this text between two quotation marks, and the message is just going to be hello world. So very, very simple. We're calling a function, a Python function that prints data on screen. The function is called print, and then we're giving it the text that we want to print in here. Now, this is done, and you can actually run the file like this. But it's actually better to include the Python shebang at the start of each Python file you create. The shebang is a directive that tells the operating system how to handle this specific file. So, because this is a Python file, the shebang is going to be a hash followed by an exclamation mark followed by usr bin env. And if you're writing a Python 2 program, you should type Python. If you're writing a Python 3 program, you should type Python 3. So, like I said, this line is not mandatory, but it's a common practice, and it also allows us to run this file as an executable, so the system will automatically know that this is a Python file. Now, once done with this, we can save this. So I'm going to go to File, Save, and I'm going to put this in my root directory, and I'm going to call this hello.py. I'm going to click on Save. And now if I go to my files, you can see I have the file in here in my home, which is my root directory. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to open my terminal to run this file. And the terminal opens on the root directory by default. So if I do pwd, you'll see I'm already in root. And if I do ls to list all the current files and directories, you can see I have hello.py in here. Now, to run this file, we have to first say Python, and then specify the Python file name that we want to run. The reason for this is because, as you can see in here, the code is just simple text, and the computer does not understand this simple text. So what we're doing in here is we're actually calling an interpreter, a Python interpreter, and we're passing this file to the interpreter. You can think of the interpreter as a translator that can translate text from one language to another. So in this case, it's going to translate the program that we wrote in Python to machine language so that the computer can understand. This is actually why we also put this line in here. This line tells the system the location of the interpreter, so that if someone tries to run this file without specifying Python in front of it, the system will know that this is a Python interpreter and pass this file to the interpreter so that it can convert it from Python code to machine code. So you can think of the interpreter as a person that knows two languages. For example, it knows English and Spanish. So you can talk to it in English and it will translate what you say to Spanish. So now if I hit enter, you can see that my code is getting executed in here, and I can see the message that I specified in here being displayed on screen. So that's perfect. And if you actually want to run this in Python 3, you can just type python3 hello.py, and again you can see that the code getting executed exactly the same. And this goes back to me when I was talking about Python 2 and 3, and I said there isn't a huge difference between them. So that's it for this lecture. I just wanted to spend some time talking about Python 2 and 3, and I also wanted to give you a basic understanding of what a program is and how to run it. Some people think of a program as this complicated thing, but all it is simply a text file with some text in it, and when you run it, you have to run it with the interpreter of the language. Now, I should also mention some languages such as C, they would require you to compile the code before running it. So compiling the code will actually convert the text that you have in here into another file that the computer can understand. And then instead of running this file, the source file, you will run the file that the compiler produces. And we'll actually see how we can convert Python code, Python